Hey everyone, what's going on? It's 2 minutes to review. It's Matt.
And it's Zach.
This episode brought to you by Lucky 13 Beard Co. All the best beard balms and oils in one place, including our brand new Lemmy-inspired beard oil. We're going to give you a code of the episode, 10% off your entire order. In the meantime, I guess we can give you a review. You click the picture. They're back with another one. I know you're dying to know what it sounds like. It is the latest from Slipknot.
The end so far. All you really have to say is new Slipknot album, and boom, everyone's excited because, truth be told, and we've discussed this both when we reviewed their last album, We Are Not Your Kind, as well as even just talking about new metal in general. Slipknot is probably one of the biggest modern metal bands, period. Just right now, they are one of the few metal bands, even I'm probably going to piss off people saying this, but even one of the few extreme sounding metal bands that can actually headline and sell out big arenas. And it's kind of crazy to think how much has changed since We Are Not Your Kind came out in 2019. I think that might have actually been, Matt, the last time you and I saw a concert at PNC together. Because I remember the album came out, and then the next day we went to see them live at PNC with Lamb of God, Volbeat. Was Lamb of God on that? No,
Gojira.
Gojira and Behemoth. And it's always just an event when Slipknot comes out of an album. What else can really be said than here's the new Slipknot album? Without further ado then, Matt, should we just get into our reviews of what Corey and Taylor and gang released this time around?
I guess.
Well, you sound so unenthusiastic about this.
Well, I'm playing it down because, everybody's really excited and somebody's got to maintain some order here.
What a terrible way to promote yourself. Yeah, sure, everyone else is excited. I'm just going to bring down the room.
No, just maintaining order. I can't give away my hand.
We're not playing poker. We're literally just competing to see who can give the longest review in under 2 minutes.
Well, then why are we waiting?
That's a good point. Matt, I'm going first. I'm not even going to beat around the bush here. I'm not going to ask you permission. I'm going first. So,
all right, you can beat your bush in 3, 2, 1, go.
All right. So in the past 2 albums or so, Slipknot sounded like a larger-than-life villain, hungry for blood, out to dominate nightmares. Now, admittedly, this album, The End So Far, lacks that drive, but instead sounds like if Slipknot was attempting to soundtrack a hellish psychedelic LSD trip, almost as if they were trying to attack the listeners psychologically instead of physically like the last 2 albums. And as a result, the band is still delivering a hellish sounding album, but probably also their most experimental and trippy sounding effort. And even sprinkle in a few of the raw origin sounds of Slipknot, like which Chapleton Rag, sounding like it could have been on the first self-titled album. And then you also got songs like H377, Warranty, Hive Mind that could have easily fit on Iowa. A few also hard rock leaning songs like Heirloom and Deshade that would have fit perfectly on All Hope Is Gone. But then you got songs like Adderall that are so uncharacteristically like Slipknot that they make songs like Spiders and Kill Pop sound even heavier. It's really an album that you can see Slipknot trying to cross that fine line between dabbling in songs that could attract non-metal listeners while also producing sounds that would scare the shit out of those same listeners. So it's going to probably take you a few listens to wrap your head around it, but all in all, it quickly becomes one of Slipknot's more enjoyable listening experiences.
Time and a star rating out of 5.
So I'm torn about this. So I'm not going to lie. We Are Not Your Kind still resonates with me. I'm still blown away by that album. And I still stand by my 4-star rating on that one. This one, not that I didn't enjoy it. It took me a few more listens to really get into it. It's a very good album. It's, like I said, they're more experimental sounding. As experimental as a Slipknot album can sound. Because let's be real, we're not talking about a band that constantly changing sounds here. I'm leaning towards 3.5 stars, but I could probably find myself over time either going to 4 or 3, if that makes sense. I don't really know if I'm going to be revisiting this album the same way that I have past albums. Not a lot of the songs hit me the same way that their past albums did, but then I also think back to how Corey Terrell sounds phenomenal. Not that he never did, but like there's something about his vocals on this album that are borderline trippy and operatic that makes this a fun listen. So right now I'm leaning towards 3.5 star. Long story short. So Matt, you heard what I thought of the end so far. What is your review?
Coming up after these messages.
You ready?
Let's do it.
3, 2, 1, 5, 5, 5. You're 6, 6, 6.
So there's just something about this album that I can't quite put my finger on, that if it's intentional, it's great. If it's not, it's weird. It just feels off. It doesn't really feel for me like a traditional Slipknot album. And I think maybe what some of that is coming from is that We Are Not Your Kind was such a strong album from Slipknot, and there were so many memorable moments, and it was a special listening experience from the very beginning of the album. This just sounds like, and I've said this in a bunch of reviews lately about a couple of different albums, but it really feels like if Slipknot tried to do a progressive album, this is what it would turn out like. And it is very dark and very weird. It does bring along vibes of classic Slipknot on various tracks throughout the album. And I think maybe one of the most standout points on here that you can really hang your hat on as a true single, kind of like Unsainted on We Are Not Your Kind, is the Dying song, or maybe even Chapeltown Rag to an extent. But it really feels like I could believe Slipknot doing this as almost like a B-side album. Not truly, something that's meant to be in the true timeline of all of their mainstream albums. I just feel like there's something really off about the listening experience on here that may have Slipknot listeners looking for more, but truly satisfying the diehards inside of the Slipknot camp.
I have a lot of thoughts of what you just said, but before we get into that deeper discussion, out of 5 stars, what would you give?
Honestly, I'm going to say 3. Like I said, there's not a lot that's wrong here from Slipknot. It just feels weird. Like you can't really put your finger on this being truly Slipknot. And I know somebody's going to say, that's not true at all. This is Slipknot at their best and blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
I think you said it perfectly. Diehard fans are going to love this.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's definitely moments where you can tell they're trying to get, experiment with the proggier aspects that might appeal to non-Slipknot fans. But I think you're right. There's something about this album is off.
I think maybe they came back too fast from We Are Not Your Kind.
Well, I also wonder, because I think when I talk about how it's always an event with a Slipknot album, I feel like it wasn't as much of a huge event when they announced this album. And I wonder if it's because, last year, Clown revealed that this is indeed their last album with Roadrunner Records. Hence, maybe the album title, The End So Far, because if, you want to look deeper into it, this is an end of an era for Slipknot in that they're parting ways with a label they've been part of for so long.
Yep.
And I think they've made it very clear that all the members have made it very clear that they're not really happy with how things have gone the past few years of Roadrunner. And for anyone who's followed the history of that label, they've gone from being one of the premier extreme labels of all times to a shell of itself. No offense to people currently involved with Roadrunner, but Slipknot have been very vocal about that. So I almost wonder, to your point of this being almost like a B-side album, how much of this was Slipknot really putting it in their all into this versus, all right, this is the last album. Let's get this out now so that we can go forward and form our own label, essentially.
Yeah. There's just so much on here that when you try to take it in, like normally, Slipknot has got very many layers and many sounds that they've gone through throughout the years. For them to find a sonic space that they haven't really explored yet, it's weird to get to those areas, especially with a band like Slipknot, because when it works, it works. When it doesn't, it doesn't. And I don't know. There's just something there that I can't put my finger on. And I tried to listen to it like multiple times to figure it out, and I just can't.
Part of me also feels like, with the last few albums, once I'm hearing it, I could envision them playing it live, putting on the above and beyond live show while playing this. And this is kind of going back to like my description of this is more of a soundtrack to a hellish LSD trip. I feel like this is more of the band taking kind of like a studio approach to an album versus a live approach. It just doesn't feel like a live album. It feels like in the studio playing this out and like putting pieces together, but not really on stage. And maybe that's a huge missing component.
I mean,
they're a lot amazing live band. Anyone who's seen them once knows that they put on a next to none live show.
I'm going to say this for what it's worth. If anybody is still listening to this after my weird ass take on the album, this is probably one of the hardest reviews I've ever had to do for an album.
That's saying a lot.
It's odd. Like it's just so odd. And once you hear the album for yourself, I think it'll make a little bit more sense. But it's just an odd record.
What makes it even...
And it's odd to like pinpoint things on here to say that's good, that's bad, they could have done this better. Like we do that all the time, and there's no qualms about calling something out on an album when it's great or when it's terrible. But here it's like it's almost like a ball of yarn. Like you don't know what's in the center until you pull it all apart, and then you look at it like, well, where did it all go?
This album crazy is that I still enjoyed this album. As odd as it, I think that's what makes this even more odd and hard to review, is that there's definitely something flawed here that I can't pinpoint, but I still enjoyed it. I don't know if it's just because, it's still Slipknot, so of course it's going to be enjoyable, or if maybe it's enjoyable for how different it is for Slipknot.
That could be it too. Or maybe the fact that they almost took like a step back and look at the rest of their career with this. Like you mentioned, you could see some of these songs being on the first album, or some sounds coming from like Iowa, or even the subliminal verse. Like there's pockets of old Slipknot weaved in throughout this album, and almost kind of like a take on the album from We Are Not Your Kind, if that makes sense.
You know what? I'm going to throw a trippy fan theory out here. So we talked about how this is the last album, Roadrunner, the title being The End So Far. What if this is Slipknot's attempt at creating a concept album that's essentially an unofficial biography of the band's Roadrunner era? And it's them incorporating all these sounds, that it's taking you on a journey of how the band started to how the band ended up here. So it's almost like this is what you've known us for, all these different sounds, which to the non-metal listener might not sound all that different, but if you follow Slipknot, you definitely can hear the band's evolutions through album. So what if this is their weird attempt at kind of doing a chronicle of all those different sounds over time into one, as a way to capsule all that into things and be like, all right, that's it. Now it's time to move on to the future.
I mean, that very well may be.
Or am I overthinking it?
I don't think so. I think there is some merit to it.
Because I don't see a band like Slipknot just half-assing it just to get out of a fucking contract.
I wouldn't put it past anybody.
That's true too. And that's the other problem too, is that if this really is a half-assed Slipknot album, then my God, they are really just that good, because I don't feel like I'm listening to something that's half-assed. That's what makes this so much odder. It's different, but it's not like them going, all right, let's just get this over if contract's almost done, which it still could very well be. But if that is, then them uninspired still sounds more inspired than most bands.
True, but if it's a B-side album and it's stuff that they left off of We Are Not Your Kind, maybe that's something to be said too.
I don't know if it is, though.
True, we don't know.
All the interviews I've kind of seen implies that it's not. But who knows if it's just stuff that was reused or that was kind of left off the side and just tinkered around more. I don't know.
Because, I mean, think about it. We Are Not Your Kind came out in 2019. Chapeltown Rag single came out in 2021, and here we are in 2022 with two more singles, The Dying Song and Yen, being released. So,
well, I mean, it's not. Keep in mind, they had a lot of time on their hands, more so than normal in the 2-year gap. If there hadn't been a global pandemic that happened between that album release and this, I'd be like, yeah, that's really surprising at how fast they did this, given that the band is kind of notorious for taking their time with releasing new music.
And that's why I say that.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think this is a band that, granted, they did start playing again in 2021, but they definitely had more chunk of time on their hands, it seemed like. And you know what? Who cares? Because we know what really is important here. The times. Matt, what was my score? Did I review this album in under 2 minutes?
You did.
I did.
At 1 minute and 37 seconds.
1 minute and 37 seconds? I thought I went long on that one.
Nope.
Well, congratulations, because yes, you did give a review in under 2 minutes. And yes, you win at 1 minute and 45 seconds. This was a close one.
Nice. It was.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Do you all agree with what we just said? Do you think
Probably not.
Well, you know what? I'm actually very curious. Maggots, tell us what you think. Do you think we're out of our minds? Do you think we don't understand the master, Corey Taylor's brain? Or do you kind of agree with us and you're also still scratching your head as to what you're listening to? Let us know on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at Epic Footnote. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel to hear more reviews like this, as well as check out some other cool podcasts that may or may not include Corey Taylor, because everyone loves Corey Taylor. And once again, thank you to Lucky 13 Beard Co.
Log on to Lucky13, the number beardco.com. Go in there, find any beard balm or oil that fits who you are as a person, because there's something on there for everyone. And no matter what you pick, it is going to be of the highest quality. Your beard is going to feel amazing. Throw it in your cart, and even throw in our brand new Lemmy-inspired beard oil, bourbon, tobacco, cola, leather. It smells fantastic. You're going to smell like rock and roll. And use the code EFP10 at checkout and get 10% off of your entire order. EFP10 at checkout. Lucky13, the number beardco.com.
Thanks so much for listening. I'm going to leave before I push my fingers into my eyes.
All hope is gone.